For the first time in at least 4 decades, a U.S. service member has defected to North Korea. But as we get into the story, we realize it's both more complicated and more stupider than any of us could have imagined. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran, and let's get into this. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about who exactly this defector is. The defector's name is PV2, being misreported as Private Second Class, Travis King. And Travis King is a 23-year-old Cav scout who was stationed in Korea apparently for at least a few years, or at least several months. He's based out of Fort Bliss. He joined the Army in January of 2021. So for what it's worth, guys, if you serve for really over about a year and you haven't at least made PFC, that's usually seen as pretty fraught. Generally, if you are able to just stay out of trouble for like 6 months, you'll make it to PFC. So this is someone who should, if he was a more put together soldier, be at a point where he was a specialist, probably starting to be groomed for sergeant type roles or promotion to sergeant. Instead, of course, the fact that he seems to be at such an incredibly low rank is probably indicative of the fact that he's gotten in some trouble. And sure enough, right, in terms of awards, he's literally only gotten the Thanks for Playing awards, the award you get for doing, well, just being in a place for a length of time. National Defense Service Medal, Korean Defense Service Medal for existing in Korea successfully, and the Overseas Service Ribbon for successfully existing in a country that isn't the United States. But what's more interesting is that during his short time in South Korea, King was prosecuted on at least 2 charges. The first, and actually, let's see if we can figure this out a little bit more specifically. Here we go. The soldier was due to face disciplinary action in the U.S. military. Now, what seems to have occurred is that Private King, first in September of this year, got into an altercation with a club goer in a Korean club, reportedly, and I can't make this up, reportedly because the other person refused to share his drinks with King. So imagine walking into a club and demanding a random person from another country who probably doesn't speak your language give you drinks. That sounds like something that is not the actions of exactly a mature adult. And again, this is indicative of, unfortunately, a lot of soldiers, right? A lot of them struggle to make mature decisions. And while the U.S. military is often a place that young men who need some additional supervision, or young people that need some additional supervision and leadership and maturing, can sometimes go and get that sort of direction that they need, there's a level of immaturity that no amount of leadership and supervision will fix. And this sounds, unfortunately, like Private King may be one of these type of soldiers. So according to one story, Private King demanded this drinks from a Korean national. When the Korean national refused, Private King struck him in the face multiple times. Then the police were called, but the Korean national elected not to press charges against Private King, decided they didn't want to take them down that road. But not 1 month later, Private King was at it again. This time in the early morning of October 8th, they got another report that King had been assaulting another person, right? And police officers arrived, but King continued being, quote, aggressive toward the victim and later aggressive towards police officers, and was detained in a patrol car. While detained in the patrol car, he yelled, quote, I can't say this and get demonetized. He yelled, F Korean Army, F Korean police. really trying to make friends at every turn here. If you're inside a police car, guys, these are not the things you should say about the police. This is true in every country, even like Korea, where they're just aren't quite the same level of problematic stories around law enforcement. He then, of course, kicked the right hand to the back seat of the car multiple times, seemingly in an effort to escape, and caused around $4,000 of damage to the car. Yeah. Whoa. Okay. Here's what's also crazy. That September 25th case, here's a paragraph on it, where he punched the national multiple times in the face after a drunken altercation at 9:40 a.m., guys. Private King was partying at 9:40 a.m. in Korea, okay? Because King was mad, the assault victim, also a club visitor, did not share drinks with him. Wild stuff. So what happened after King? Well, King was tried and convicted of, assaulting these officers and damaging the Korean police patrol car. King was then sent to South Korean prison, where he stayed for 2 months. And then he was released into the custody of the U.S. military. And the military, listen, you have to understand that just because you've been punished by one nation's justice system, the Korean justice system, doesn't mean the U.S. Army was going to just let this private back into the fold, right? He had embarrassed the United States military and proven that he is a diplomatic liability. So the U.S. military decided we need to get this soldier back to the States, where the military is going to determine an additional punishment for him, right? And so they took this soldier to, basically, as far as I can tell, directly to Incheon International Airport. And by take him, it means literally a non-commissioned officer was probably with this private continually up until they got to the security checkpoint. Because obviously they won't let you through the security checkpoint without a boarding pass. You cannot do it. So I don't fault this NCO for getting this soldier all to the legal limit of where he could be escorted. Again, one of the things that sort of annoys me that the U.S. military expects is that while, yes, it has a much closer supervision of these adults, the U.S. Army is still an organization made up entirely of legal adults who are capable of making adult decisions. This was not even like an 18-year-old who had just left home. Remember, Private King is, what did they say, 23? So yeah, this is someone who would be like a year plus out of college. This is someone who's been an adult for for over 5 years. Not exactly new to how the world works. But the soldier is taken to the security checkpoint by an NCO and is presumably told to go through the immigration security checkpoint. And instead of simply boarding the plane and going back to the United States, and in all likelihood, this soldier was probably facing some level of discharge from the U.S. military, probably, again, a less than honorable or other than honorable discharge, given his conviction in Korean courts. But a alcohol-fueled altercation, a 2-month stay in prison, a fine, these are not. This doesn't make the news, right? This is not something that is going to be a big issue. It's an issue for his commander. It's an issue for probably his battalion and his brigade commander. It's embarrassing for the leadership because leadership are inexplicably blamed for the actions of the soldiers assigned to their unit, sometimes to a degree that I find stupid. But this soldier was almost certainly going to get discharged for his actions in Fort Bliss, and just go back to wherever he enlisted from, and would, like, the consequences he would face would not honestly be that severe all told. In all likelihood, he would just simply have a marginal discharge on his record, and would honestly probably have the right to appeal it in several months, as is common with discharges. So this guy was facing like bad but not life-destroying consequences from this incident. But Private King is not content with that, apparently. Instead, as he passed through the security checkpoint and was no longer under the supervision of his NCO, the moment probably he was not under direct supervision from a non-commissioned officer, he didn't get on the plane. Instead, he went to Panmunjom and joined a inter-Korean border tour, signing up as a civilian. Then, apparently, according to one eyewitness, as the tour wrapped up and entered the area where the Korean and North Korean and South Korean forces negotiate, King reportedly laughed loudly and then bolted full gas across the border. The tour was quickly shuffled out. The guards on the border attempted to detain King, but were unable to. As a result, King was detained by North Korea, and no one seems to know where he is or what is going on, right? North Korean state media has yet to openly report about King's whereabouts, and there's no rush for North Korea to react quickly, simply because right now this is very embarrassing for the United States. And although King has criminal records, he's still an American citizen, according to a North Korea expert here in the U.S. or at the Korean Institute for National Unification. The U.S. will request repatriation, but I don't think he would be a useful trading card for North Korea to negotiate with. Again, it's a bothersome problem for the U.S. and North Korea, he said, suggesting the most likely scenario is North Korea taking its time with an investigation and repatriating King after communicating behind closed doors. And I think this is true, right? It's also highly unlikely that Pyongyang will send King to prison or penalize him. Again, North Korea would prefer to have some U.S. soldiers defect simply for propaganda purposes. So it's in their incentive to actually treat King fairly well. And again, he hasn't caused some sort of damage or political or otherwise to North Korea or any crimes against the DPRK. So it seems unlikely that he would simply be sent to prison for a criminal punishment. Unless, of course, though, given his extreme aggression towards South Korean police, I imagine that aggression towards North Korean police would go even more badly for the young private. And, right, considering his low military rank and the fact that almost certainly the entire military was in the process of getting rid of him, North Korea would not get much intelligence from the young man either. Right, the biggest questions really are about how King managed to exit the airport. Again, probably because it's not legal to go into the airport without a boarding pass. And the military, though the military, I guess, could in theory have assigned a non-commissioned officer to literally babysit this soldier all the way to Fort Bliss. Instead, they likely had a soldier from Fort Bliss at the airport ready to pick up this soldier, and then another soldier taking him all the way to security checkpoint. So all he had to do unsupervised was go through security, board a plane, and then get off the plane. But again, instead, in those tiny moments, he fled to a nuclear-armed enemy of the United States, as one does. All right. So, right, there's a perception. Now, here's the other thing, right? Being transferred to U.S. authorities, King would likely be subject to what's called the Uniform Code of Military Justice and U.S. laws. And there's a perception among Koreans that American military personnel can do these kinds of things with impunity. But the UCMJ, a separate justice system that in some ways is more forgiving, but in a lot of ways is much, much more strict. The UCMJ is not to be trifled with and can met out punishments pretty severe, oftentimes with minimal of what we would consider a trial or full rollout of the justice system. So again, the biggest speculation, and I sort of agree with them on this, is that likely there needs to be some level of improvement, probably at the U.S. military level, to ensure that soldiers who are disciplinary issues or who may be flight risks are escorted entirely through the process, which means that some poor 23-year-old NCO is going to have to take like 3 days away from his or her family in Korea, get on a plane with a soldier who's done something stupid, fly that soldier to Fort Bliss, turn around, get back on a plane, and fly back to Korea. Pretty annoying. Unless, of course, maybe you give them a couple of days of leave in between and you say, fine, in exchange for babysitting this jabroni on their way to Fort Bliss, you get to take a long weekend, fly out on Friday, spend the weekend with your wife and kids in Bliss, and then come back. It's not leave. It's just, we're just doing you a solid. But that would involve, of course, a level of commitment to caring for soldiers that a lot of commands sometimes lack. Anyway, guys, all in all, is this like a major international incident? Yeah, it's definitely going to get a Wikipedia article in the U.S.-Korean relations. But is this necessarily a major security incident? Is this King going to share the U.S. nuclear secrets? No. What this fundamentally is a young man who seems to have a pattern of aggressive criminal behavior, simply not thinking through his decisions. I think that's basically what it is. This is someone who seems to not think through what they're doing. Again, someone who's up partying until 10 a.m., drinking, becoming belligerently drunk, fighting with other people. It's just a problematic soldier. And the reality is that poor decision-making can take all sorts of forms. And truth be told, if this is someone who is willing to assault a Korean civilian, get a pat on the wrist, then days later commit another assault and then fight police and attempt to destroy their car, this is someone who I'm just glad no one else got hurt, honestly. Right now, it seems like it's annoying, but guess what? I would rather have the entire U.S. government, the entire North Korean government pull their hair out over what to do with this kid than see him hurt a soldier, a civilian, because at the end of the day, right, nobody really wants to deal with this kid. Not the U.S. military, not the U.S. government, not the Korean government, not the North Korean government. And when there's this level of aligned incentives, I think you're going to see this poor dude spend a couple weeks in North Korean holding areas, and then he'll be released to the U.S. Army, who will punish the absolute bejesus out of him. He'll probably spend significant amounts of time in jail. Again, given that deliberately absconding from orders, going AWOL, and defecting to one of America's enemies is going to be way, way, way worse than whatever punishment he was going to face at Fort Bliss. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for you. Thank you, as always, for joining me. If you want me to do breakdowns of some of the combat footage coming out of the Ukraine war, I can't do that on YouTube. I do that on my premium site, combatvetnews.com. If you become a member, right, you can get access to any one of these tiers. We'll get you access to the members-only content that includes looking at Russian POW detention, Russian trenches getting a taste of their own rockets, trench warfare, minefield videos, and more. This is where we do the deep analysis of the Ukraine conflict. So if you want to check that out, it's all uncensored and it's all on combatvetnews.com. See you guys in the next one.